Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben, and in today's video we'll be taking a look at the Crimson Moth, aka Heartless Hunter. I feel like I'm at the risk of sounding like a broken record when it comes to these YA book reviews, as Romantasy seems to be the flavor of the moment within this genre. I'm having some difficulty with differentiating aspects of the book. So I was reading Crimson Moth alongside listening to A Magic Steeped in Poison as an audiobook, and I was having a little bit of difficulty moving back and forth between those two titles because of their similar plot structure and also a remarkable amount of repeated imagery that they share as well. YA Romantasy is kind of conglomerating in my mind as this big monolithic thing, and I do want to talk about what I felt with this book in particular, the plot line and the things going into that, but I'm concerned that I'm getting to the point where all these reviews are feeling the same. One thing I really do appreciate about Crimson Moth is it is upfront with you about what it is going to be about, letting you know that the main character Rune is going to be pursuing this relationship with Gideon, and he is on the other side of this conflict. It was nice seeing a relationship that was primarily predicated on this idea of a cat and also cat back and forth between the two as they try to use each other to expose or gain information from the other side. So the whole time that they're doing this courtship, and you get perspectives from both. So there are perspective chapters from Gideon and perspective chapters from Rune. Gideon is trying to figure out, is Rune a witch? And Rune is trying to get information from Gideon to try to free people who have been captured. And so they have this like back and forth throughout the book of trying to outwit each other. And that was a fun aspect of the book. The magic system was okay. It was blood-based. If blood came from another person, that was more powerful magic. And I believe if blood came from another person and they were unwillingly giving it to you, that was even more powerful magic, but it led to a very major downside for the person that you're taking the blood from. Rune largely uses blood from her period to create her magic and create her spells, because if she were to cut herself to get blood and then use that for magic, the scars that she gives herself become silver, and that is the major tell for how to tell if someone is a witch. Interesting world building. It does open up some creative avenues for how can you get around the idea of not being found out, since now the witches are being hunted. And it gives you some idea of what society looked like when witches were in power and they had these beautiful silver, like decorative scars around their bodies. But in practice, it's largely used from the witch hunters to strip women to tell if they're witches, which is rather degrading. And then, of course, with this relationship where Gideon is trying to figure out, like, oh, is she a witch? Well, the best way to find out is to get her naked. It was like, okay, I like the world building you've set up. Not exactly a fan of how you are using it to tell your story. The other major thing that this book in particular I struggled with or frustrated me was it did this thing where it would over-explain a situation, and I feel even for a YA book it was a little heavy-handed and felt awkward at parts. This is the end of chapter 1, and Rune is figuring out that her friend has been captured by the Blood Guard, I believe is their name, and is in the hands of the enemy. So Rune dropped the woolen dress and spun to face the door, her breath catching in her throat. Closed, the door gave her a full view of the bloody X smeared from corner to corner across its wooden surface, the mark of the blood guard. Seraphine wasn't in the stable calming her horse. Soldiers had found her, stripped her, and taken her with them. Nan's oldest friend was in the hands of the blood guard, the most dangerous place for a witch to be. And that last line, the most dangerous place for a witch to be, really felt unnecessary. And it's not the only point in the book that does this, but it will have these lines. It's like, and that was really serious. And it's like, of course it's really serious. These are hunters specifically going out and persecuting witches and taking them and imprisoning them. I don't need the extra line of, and that's real dangerous, as you know, coming off of reading To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods, which I gave 3 stars. I thought the writing was not great, but the discourse around that was heavily around the idea that it was a colonizer romance, and there was this big controversy in the comments of the Goodreads, and I'm curious to hear specifically from that crowd, because I'm not seeing the backlash against this one, the difference between what occurred in that book and what's occurring in this book, because Gideon is a hunter of witches, someone who is going out and stripping witches and imprisoning them and killing them. I know To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods was drawing on actual history, although it made it into a fantasy setting. I wonder if that's the major divide here, is because it was based on the occupation of, I think, Manchuria. If that is a little bit more direct with real life history and that's what's getting people upset about it, or if there's some other factor, some other facet of the storytelling that makes this less controversial and less upsetting. I don't know. It was just something I was thinking about as I was reading. We have the back and forth between Rune and Gideon, and they are trying to one-up each other, but they're also, of course, slowly falling for each other to the point where you know you're going to get up to some sort of betrayal, and they're going to have to reevaluate their feelings and what's going to happen. There was a bit of a shocking development partway through the book that I don't think you would have predicted at the start, but it was fun to try to figure out once the reveal was made that someone is not who they claim to be. I felt like that storyline did kind of come out of nowhere so we could have another villain to place above the conflict between the two characters. I feel like this is happening a lot in these YA series, especially these duologies, where you have the first story and then there's some major shift toward the end of the first book to make it into one of these more like generic epic fantasies against some great evil. It weakens a bit of the conflict you've had between the two characters, because now you have a very easy out for their cooperation rather than actually having to work through the conflict naturally. You've created a heightened situation that they now both have to deal with, and that I feel like is an easy out for them to work together in the future. Overall, I'm giving The Crimson Moth, or Heartless Hunter, a 3 out of 5. Every positive aspect of the book also has a negative quality to it. So I enjoyed the world building. I enjoyed the idea of witches who have to use blood for their magic, but I don't like the way that that was utilized for the romance. I liked the plot of the two of them doing this back and forth, trying to one-up each other and trying to figure out, you as the reader trying to figure out, okay, how did they get ahead of this trap that the other one set? And that was a lot of fun, but then at some point it stops being about that, starts being about this larger conflict, and I don't like the epic scale that it slides back into. The prose was distracting at points and a little bit over explaining certain elements, but the pacing for the story overall was fine. It moved along at a decent clip. So with the writing, there's pros and cons as well. So middle of the road, good book, decent. I think if you enjoy the romantasy genre, I think you'll like the interplay between the two sides, the confusion that builds as to the nature of their relationship as they get closer to each other by trying to deceive the other. Thanks for joining me on another Fairy Loot book review. I hope your reading journey is going well. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so we can grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.
Here you go.
Thank you. It's ditto.